Good morning. For today's Read Aloud, we're going to pick up right where we left off yesterday. Yesterday we read about green eggs and ham, and the reason Dr. Seuss wrote that was from that same book of list, really, of words for first graders. But this time someone bet him that he couldn't use just 50 of those words. And he proved them wrong and wrote green eggs and ham that had a lot of repeating words, but only 50 words, and it actually earned him $50, which was awesome. That was a lot of money back then too, so that was a good bet and something he worked really hard on. So now, in 1957, The Cat in the Hat has now made Ted into a superstar author. So even though he just wrote Green Eggs and Ham too, The Cat in the Hat is just gaining a lot of popularity. He had become the head of his own publishing house. As if that wasn't enough for 1 year, he also decided to invent a new character named the Grinch. Ted liked to joke that the Grinch was really himself. He even had a license plate that said Grinch, which this is a picture of his old car. How cool is that? From California. As for where the name came from, he says, I just drew him and looked at him, and it was obvious to me his name was Grinch. As soon as it was published, How the Grinch Stole Christmas was a big hit. A few years later, he got a call from his old friend named Chuck Jones. Chuck was a famous animator. Animators are those people who can create people, robots, animals in your movies and cartoons and make them look real and make them have voices and make them have talking sounds and colors that they normally wouldn't be. That's what animation looks like. It's turning a drawing into a real video. So Chuck Jones was the creator of maybe some cartoon people you might have heard of before, named the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. If you don't know those, look them up. There's some old cartoons that are pretty funny that maybe your mom and dad watched when they were kids. He wanted to make a version of the Grinch for TV. So Chuck Jones calls and says, hey, why don't we turn this Grinch character into a TV cartoon person? He didn't really love the idea, but he said sure. And he let Chuck turn the Grinch green. The way that Dr. Seuss really drew him was in black and white with pink eyes, like you will see in his book. It was Chuck's idea to turn him green to do things with him on TV. So in 1966, The Grinch Christmas appeared on TVs and has been a favorite holiday video ever since. So I'm going to take a pause and read to you How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And you can see him in only black and white with pink eyes was the only color he was given in the real book. You wrote it for Teddy Owens. This may be one you know before, so if you know part of it, feel free to read it along with me. It's a fun one, and it's one a lot of us have heard before, but I still want to read it anyways because I love it. Every who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm, lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who, down in Whoville beneath, was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew. All the Who boys and girls would wake bright and early. They'd rush for their toys, and then, oh, the noise. Oh, the noise, 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 noise. That's one thing he hated. The noise, 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 noise. Then the Who's, young and old, would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, 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 feast. And they would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Who's would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas thing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've lived with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea, an awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. You can see his nice pink eyes, everything else black and white. You can also see really clearly Dr. Seuss drew all of his characters with U-shaped eyes if you go back and look at any of his books. Also a little fun fact in the middle of the story. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat. And he chuckled and clucked, what a great Grinchy trick. Why, with this coat and this hat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeer are scarce, there were none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said. If I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max, and then took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some empty old sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, "Giddy up!" and the sleigh started down towards the homes where the Who's lay a snooze in their town. All the windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Who's were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square, "This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, and then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. "These stockings," he grinned, "are the first things to go." Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums. And he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimbley. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. "And now," grinned the Grinch, "I will stuff up the tree." And the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a little Who, little Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter who'd gotten out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. "Why, my sweet little tot," the fake Santa Claus lied, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there. Then I'll bring it back here." And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then the last thing he took was the log from the fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 15:15 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze when he packed up his sled, packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-hoo to the Who's, he was grinchiously humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I must simply hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low. Then it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry. Very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or another, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. Great story about how things that we do together are really from the heart. They're not about things that we get. They're things about what is inside of each person that makes other people happy. And those are the things we need to be thankful for. Have a wonderful day. I miss you guys.